I'm the more technologically challenged of the group, but hopefully this will work. And if not, then you'll have to let me know because I probably won't be able to see you. Let me get us going with a couple of things. Hopefully, yeah. Okay. Does everybody see this?
Yes, looks beautiful.
So far, so good. So the question I have for our group of people that are joining us, we wanted to start this off with a conversation of what does live streaming mean to you? And I've already front loaded some answers just so you know, because I rig things on a regular basis. Ah, I love it. Engaging. It works. Yes. Anybody else want to weigh in? Engaging, live, virtual. Let me see what I got. I got to move this out of the way. Current. Oh, I love it. Fun. I put that in there, so that doesn't really count. Overwhelming. Ooh, we're gonna have to dig in deeper on that. Accessible. Yes, I love it. Anybody else want to weigh in? And you can, like in Florida, you can vote more than once if you want to. No, I'm just kidding. Um, we just have a long history of that. Risky. I like that. Relevant. That's a great answer. Guessing game. Ooh, we're gonna dig into that and overwhelming. Virtual class. That's starting to become a winner. All right. Anybody else want to, before we move on, anybody else want to weigh in on their, add another answer? Synchronous. Perfect. In real time. Excellent. Once, I'm going to go through social presence practice. Wow, you guys are going great. Insane in the membrane. Synchronous is starting to overtake everything. My cat talks in the background while I'm online, so you'll hear her chirping. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Authentic. I like that answer. Done. So let me do this before we really dig in deeper. And then we're going to introduce ourselves, but it gives us a chance to have you introduce yourself by sharing with us, if you would like to, why you may have chosen the answer you picked, or multiple answers. What, why did you go that? And if you don't mind introducing yourselves too at the same time, we would love to get to know you in that way. So does anybody want to, just unmic your, just unmute yourself, just open up your mic and feel free to weigh in and say, yeah, I chose virtual because, well, hey, I'm Patty Farless, and that made sense to me. Anybody else want to weigh in? I picked fun, and just so you know, I'm Patty Farless, Department of History, at UCF, and I picked fun because, well, I wanted to try to woo everyone over to thinking it would be fun. Hopefully, it is. Um, and I picked also synchronous because I think that's obviously an important point. Does anyone else want to weigh in of what you picked and why?
I'm a
Hey, my
Setzer, and
mic's working, right? My
I
mic's
picked,
working, right?
yes.
Donna,
Do you hear
please.
me?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. I, I picked risky from from a technical standpoint as the person who's behind the scenes, hoping that, everything works okay, that when you make it live, there's always that risk that not everything's going to go smooth.
You are absolutely right. As we this group has experienced already at least one time as a group, which is why we were all furiously emailing and texting each other and doing quick phone calls right up until we were getting ready to launch this. So you're absolutely right. It's synchronous. It's live. It's something at any moment. We plan for 100 things as teachers, and we know that there's going to be 101. So I think having that recognition that when you are doing a live streaming synchronous course or a component of that, that you have to be prepared, right, to be flexible. And it's good to invite your audience into that experience that, hey, we're going to try these things out, right? We're going to try to get this to work. But with any type of experience, especially with technology, anything is possible, right? And so that's something we want to be thinking about and mindful. And I think in terms of risky, we turn that maybe into a conversation about making sure we're open with the audience that, we could have some experiences, have a contingency plan that if that does happen, what will, you and your audience, especially in this case, your students, what will you do if you have a thunderstorm in Florida and everybody loses their internet, which happens on a regular basis here as we get closer into the summer months and into the fall. So those are things I think that are really important to make sure we're sharing. And we want. I just went to a chair search meeting, and the first thing he said is, we're so trained to be the authority to go into classrooms. I mean, that's part of what our training and our scholarship is, that we become an authority to write books and go in and teach a course and whatever it might be. So it's hard for us to admit and say to, hey, I'm not, and I'm experiencing this with you. And yet that's having that humility and practicing that humility is such an important part. And I think in live streaming, that's an important part of it. Does anybody else want to share before we start to move on? And we can revisit this. I mean, we don't have to leave this alone just because we change the slide. The conversation certainly can be fluid and move with as our conversation goes. But does anybody else want to share and introduce yourselves? Because we'd love to get to know you. And I'll just call on you. I mean, that's really how I am. I mean, I'm just rude that way. Like Martha Hubertz, I'll just say, Martha Hubertz, which one did you pick?
Which one do you think I picked?
I have seriously no idea at this point.
All right, I did two. So virtual, because hello, and then insane in the membrane. I thought you thought that was me.
Okay, so virtual, I think we got down, but what did you mean by insane in the membrane?
And again, I mean, and I know we're
I like
getting to
it.
this with the like COVID changes and stuff. So I think for some of us, the live streaming, that virtual kind of modality that we wheeled out during, and I know we had a modality session. What was that yesterday, Flo? Like where we talked about all the different modalities and kind of the shift there. Um, but virtual is here to stay. And this kind of live streaming or V modality or whatever your university is calling it. And I know I personally, and you in fact witnessed some of it visiting my classes
Sure.
during COVID, where I had some issues, which goes to somebody's risky. That is somebody else who also taught virtually during COVID.
Yes.
It's a little crazy. So you have your entire, web course, and you also have this. Yeah, it was a
Well,
lot.
I like that you picked insane in the membrane, the idea of a membrane, right? Which is it could be gross, I don't know, but it could also be incredibly, it's organic. We're no longer thinking about walls like we did, right? We are now in kind of this learning space that is much, much more flexible. It's much more in some ways vulnerable. It's much more organic, and should be organic in many ways, right? And it should be nurturing, and it should be something that's growing and hopefully not in a bad way, but in a good way. So I like that you actually put it in there, that we're kind of almost envisioning ourselves as sharing kind of a membrane space rather than a box or walls. So, and I think accessible, and this gets to the point. There's, I think, two things that I would say is, and bringing up your points of what you think about is, you need to have, and I know Evelyn's going to talk about this, make sure you establish your standards and expectations of how people should conduct themselves in a live streaming course, because we don't even have a 3-second delay. Right now, sometimes we may have a longer delay depending on your Wi-Fi, but we don't have that 3-second delay. So how are you going to lay out to your students what to expect from them as they're interacting in a space that's actually both formal and very informal, depending on where they may be sitting? So does anybody else, before we move on, and this will be the last time I ask, but does anybody else want to open up and share what you chose?
Particularly the risky person.
Well, that was Donna.
Was that Donna? Yeah, no,
Yeah, that was Donna.
Donna, I'm
Yep,
with you,
Donna.
man.
Yep, Donna
Like
shared that.
I too found this to be a very risky, and again, maybe it was the whole COVID thing.
And
Yeah,
see, we sit in two different seats, which is very interesting, right? So you're the, you're in front of the camera and I'm generally behind the camera. And so during that, yes. So I find it exciting, but there is a risk.
absolutely. And so let me kind of move us into a bigger, if I can move us into that bigger, hang on. I know I can do this. Bear with. So give you a broader perspective of where this idea started from. I worked this last year at the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning as a faculty fellow. And I was tasked with creating a faculty learning community on live streaming. And first of all, I don't live stream. My courses are all asynchronous. Um, I do live stream my office hours and some other aspects of it. But so, we did the call and I had the most wonderful colleagues join our group, this merry Robin Hood, as Flo calls us, the faculty learning community. And so we started tackling, and this is our team. Not everyone could make it today, but we certainly wanted to give nod to the work they're doing and their ongoing doing. But we do have some of our team members here. But I will go ahead and mention our team members that are not here, just to give them a shout out. Katia Ferdosi, for example, is one of our team members, and she worked on surveys with Martha Hubertz. And Florence, hopefully I'm not pronouncing his last name correctly. It worked on literature with Michael Strausser. So those are our colleagues that are also part of the team. They just were not able to make it. And then, of course, Martha Brenkle, who was part of creating syllabi, statements and expectations, and working with Evelyn as well on this. So with that, I'd like the rest of the team members that have joined us, if you don't mind, just to unmute yourself for 2 seconds and introduce yourself, because I think that would be important. And I'll call on you first so you can do that. Martha?
All right, so it's Martha again. And that's what else is there to say?
You're in Department of Psychology. There you go.
Oh yeah, I'm Department of Psychology.
And you do all
I teach
things.
big. I teach big, big, big classes. So the live stream that I was talking about earlier, or that the modality that we had, Patty was in my teaching square that semester, so she popped in, and it was insane to have 400 FTICs in a virtual space
Yeah.
during COVID at the time of TikTok challenges, and I had naked students, I had naked grandmas, I had naked. It was just wrong on many, many levels. And I'm really good at blocking out stuff when I teach normally, except the modality.
Yeah. Yeah, and you bring up some of the challenges, right, that we're
Yeah.
dealing with, and hopefully some of the work this group is doing will help to solve that. Flo, do you mind whenever you get a chance to unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Patty. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Flo Williams, as my name says in that little box there. I work at the Center for Distributed Learning, and I get to work with awesome faculty like these people on your screen here who will be talking to you this afternoon. And it helps with all of what we do. What I will drop in here is like, I like alliterations and acrostics. So you will see some of those things in our presentation. And if you do, just put like an emoji in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah. Flo is all things to me to help make sense of something. So when I'm trying to make sense of something, I say, Flo, what do you think? And she speaks about something that we're trying to work through, and then it all makes sense. And so besides being an instructional designer and technology guru that I go to, I also go to her just to say, I am trying to get the words for this, and she creates the most beautiful words to explain it. I can't do anything it near that. And Evelyn, when you get a chance, my friend, you've saved me on more than one presentation, to say the least. So take a moment, if you don't mind, to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Patty. Hi, everyone. I'm Evelyn Pegoraro. I'm in the College of Arts and Humanities at UCF in the Department of Modern Languages. I teach Portuguese and Spanish, and my classes are a lot smaller. So I have an average of 35 students, although I also have classes of 5 or 55, so anywhere in between. So it just depends on the semester and the course, but we'll talk about different class sizes and all of that too.
Absolutely. So there's going to be a couple of things we're going to talk about, but we certainly don't want this to be our agenda to be a controlling agenda. We're willing to branch out and to talk about any questions or challenges or areas that you may be wanting to do. So please see this as your presentation as much as it is ours. So we're I'm not married to it. I'm not wed to it. So I'm always open to making changes. So please feel free. We're happy to do that. But in general, we're going to talk about some surveys, what to use, what to think about, because we need to understand what are students thinking about when they think about live streaming, what are their expectations, also what are faculty. And we need to talk about the pedagogy of this. And we need to talk about syllabi statements and policies. How do you handle the naked student, or perhaps a student who's doing their best to be professional and formal, and unfortunately their roommate walks behind them, and they're not. And so what do we do about those things, and how do we handle this? So this is the risky part, but the accessible part, in thinking about how do we reach students around the world and do so in a synchronous way, I think is where live streaming is able to speak to that importance of being able to do so, if that makes sense. So, and we'll also talk about some tools and hopefully get your input. We're building hopefully a faculty facing, by faculty instructional designers, web course with modules in there for faculty to use. And one of those modules is live streaming. And so we're always looking for help, and we're always looking for suggestions. And of course, we'll do a Q&A, and then we're going to eventually be happy to share some literature that our team's been putting together as well. So that's kind of where we're headed in the next few minutes. So this is where Martha Hubertz is going to kick in, because whether she realizes it or not, she's the one that initiated this. She just doesn't quite remember. But if you don't mind scanning this, and it goes with a survey that we want to use to kind of flesh out your perspective, your ideas, your thoughts, and hopefully it works. You never know. Mine does, but I want to make sure everyone else's does. So get those phones out if you have a chance, and we want to get to know who you are, and we want to get to know your perspectives about live streaming. And some of these should be more than one answer, but it isn't. So, but do your best. Answer whatever is best or fits you. Okay, our modality ranking doesn't allow us to do it as ranking, but that's okay. You
So
can
that
tell
one you have to drag. So you just drag it with your
Oh.
finger to change the order. Yeah.
You rock. I see it now.
And I think I found it. I think I found
That's
it
good.
amongst my thousands of surveys. I was clever enough to name it live stream. So yay me.
I am doing mine right here, and hopefully you all are too. I can't see all your faces. So hopefully you are. I may be tanking the results.
Are you taking the results?
Hopefully not. Yeah, I'm taking the results. So while everyone's working on this, and then Martha's going to be gathering the data, does anybody need me to leave this up a little bit longer? I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, I'll give you guys the results. So,
At the end, and if you're willing to stay in touch, we'd love to get to know you. And especially if you have any concerns that we could touch on by the end, that would be wonderful. So we're already starting to break into interactive tools and tools you can use. And the first thing I would say is one of the things we need to do before students start your course is we need to think about using ways to get to know what do they think and expect with live streaming. So this would be one way to be thinking about that. How do we use that as a way to do? So keep thinking about surveys as a way to do this, but we'll get into kind of this deeper dive into faculty perceptions. Part of it, as Martha Hubertz brought up, COVID scarred us in many ways. It created wonderful opportunities, but so many of us had to go on to online teaching at such a quick pace, and so many had to just turn lectures into live streaming lectures. And they didn't have the training or the understanding of how to make it a different learning space for students. And as we all know, students fell behind. Online got a ding to how it was seen as a learning experience, how it was seen as a teaching experience. So we have to be mindful of that and thinking about, do we have perceptions that we need to break down? So one of the things I did was I asked my good friend Flo if she could help us talk about a pedagogy in terms of thinking about how to make that live streaming experience better, how to get students to be more successful, and how to help teachers embrace it. So Flo, if you feel like talking a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Thank you again, Patty. So I came up with these 3 words that I wanted us to think about when we were talking about our live streaming. And those were instrumentation, instruction, and interaction. O'Neill and Fisher says interactivity, faculty and students' presence are essential in an effective online learning environment. And one of the things that makes this happen is what you do in preparation for the live streaming. So right now in this session, we are modeling some of the things that we are talking about. So we started with a survey, and that's where you build quick trust with your audience. So that survey was used for or check-in. Who are you? What do you like? What have you done so far? What will you want to do? And this brings in the idea of your instrumentation. What are you using to make your meeting interactive? Today, we used both Slido and a Qualtrics survey, and those are our first tools. The next tool that you might not be talking about much, but we're using heavily is Zoom. So we are using our Zoom. We are asking you to write things in the chat. We are looking at each other, so we have video, and we are talking to each other, so we have audio. That is important in the instrument that you are using for your live streaming. And then we come to the instruction. How are you managing the process? And I'm going to give you an alliteration. Did I talk about that? Not an alliteration this time, but I'm going to do an acrostic. So this one is plan or post. So P-O-S-T. So first of all, what is the purpose of your live streaming? So what's the strategy that you are going to be using for your class? Why are you doing it? And then the O is your outcome. What is the expectation? So as if you are using live streaming to manage your curriculum, what objective are you meeting in that session? And then you come to the S, which is your structure. In today's meeting, we are using the SQ3R strategy. I don't know, some of you might be familiar with it, but it is survey, question, read, respond, review. All right, so first of all, we started with our survey. We said, where are you in your process as a live streaming person? What are you doing? What do you think about it? And then we asked you some additional questions. Patty did a good job of doing that at the beginning. She asked you some questions, and then she filled in whatever blanks that she found in those questions. And these are things that you can be doing with your students as a part of your pedagogical practice or andragogical practice. And then the next part is our timing. Today, we only have 45 minutes for this session. So we decided what our tasks were going to be and who was going to be assigned to each task. And that is something that you need to do in your class as you take live streaming out onto the roads. So today we are kicking the tires, but you are going to be driving that process of live streaming on your own. So what's your task assignment? Are you going to share files? Are you going to use polls? Are you going to moderate your messages? All of this is important for your live streaming. Now, as an instructional designer, we talk a lot about mapping. So in your live stream process, you can create what is called an engagement map or a process map. And this engagement map, across the top, you identify your agenda. So for example, we have that we were going to do a check-in, then with our survey, then we were going to do pedagogy, and then we were going to move from pedagogy to syllabus, and we're going to use tools. If I had an engagement map for that, I would have each of these items across the top with the time. And then I would have that at the back of my live stream screen. So whether you are using a computer, you can put something behind you with that map to keep you on task. But Zoom does a good job of telling us where we are in our process. So we can also just glance up at the top of the Zoom screen and we can see the timing that we have covered in the meeting. So what I want to say is, like, in live streaming, just remember that the live stream works very well for close-up demonstrations, for highly visual materials that you want to use, for content that is connected to the community. So affordability and interactivity may differ based on the tool, but it is useful that you think about a mobile-friendly approach to what are you sharing. The students might be viewing it on mobile, or they might be viewing it on a computer screen. Those are considerations that you take in when you are creating the slides, so that you don't have too much content on each slide, and so that your slide moves and changes with whatever format the student is using. And I can come back to more of this, but I want to be, I don't want to take too much of the time to go to this. So when we share the slides, if you have questions, we will continue the conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you, Flo. I told you, whatever I want to say, I just hand it to Flo, and it just becomes magical. So, and I think you already got a view of and way to hear that just now. So, and think about with live stream, with interaction, and thinking of COVID, and I know we're post-COVID, but the question becomes, are we really? And we're not sure yet. In my mind, we're not quite there, because we've got students that have been, that went through a very, very rough experience, and faculty, they're still doing so. So interaction, I just go back to this and the emotional component of this, right? How to create that, emotional connection. How can we break down the distance that sometimes exists in an asynchronous format. So this is something we want to be mindful of. In some ways, we're starting to see the best of both worlds. We're virtual. I can be in my shorts, but by the same token, I'm synchronous. So I could see the smile on Flo's face when she hears that I'm teaching in my shorts or what have you. Or PJ pants, as we all know we do. So this interaction part, I think, is so important as well. And having that plan. And we could go back to basics of just good basics of pedagogy of how do we map out what we're going to do with it, and then expand it into more detail as Flo has done. Bear with me as I move my screen. My screen's frozen up, so hang tight, guys. So my apologies. Okay. So one of the things that we've kind of started off with thinking about risky, and I got to give you credit on it. I couldn't have asked for better than to have that thrown out, because one of the things that speaks to is with live streaming, we want to know, what do students know? That's where those surveys come in. Using student surveys, we want to be planning, we want to be thinking about in a very deliberate way how we're going to deliver those interactive experience through live streaming. And one of the things we also have to do is we have to think about establishing the expectations of what live streaming is going to be, and starting with that syllabi statement and starting with those policies. And Evelyn with Martha Brinkle have been working on this, and I know it's still a work in, they're still always gathering, because every discipline has its own way of thinking about it. But Evelyn, if you don't mind taking a moment and talking about syllabi statements and some of the things you and Martha have been working on with it.
Sure. So yes, this is going to vary by course. Obviously, it depends on what you want specifically for each course as well. So this is directly from the CDL, the modalities and attributes. So courses delivered through synchronous online instruction with regularly scheduled live class meetings online. So your syllabus is going to be the first thing your students see. So we want to make sure we're establishing on that syllabus everything that we want, all of the expectations, what this is about. Do students even know what they're signing up for? Do they even know what this means? So we want to make sure everything is as clear as possible for the students, and so that they can decide if this is a course for them or not. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So these are just in the next couple of slides, some ideas of what you can include. So specific language, again, to explain what the students can expect from your course. So this is one example, right? So synchronous learning refers to all types of learning in which learners and instructors are in the same place at the same time in order for learning to take place. This includes in-person classes, live online meetings, when the whole class or smaller groups get together. So you can, again, this will be available to you all, so you can just copy and paste this directly onto your syllabus. Next slide, please. So then another one, synchronous online learning, is where instructors rely on video conferencing software, live chat features, and other real-time tools and platforms to deliver their virtual class. Students receive instant feedback from educators, teaching assistants, and their peers in this educational model, excuse me. And then the next one, I believe there's one more. So another one that you can include is synchronous online learning, is when courses are delivered from a distance in real time. In this course delivery model, students and instructors engage with the content at the same time, but from separate locations. So just some examples of what you can include. But you also want to think about being a lot more specific and going into more detail when you are writing everything in your syllabus. So are you talking about expectations as far as, are they going to have their webcams on or off? So if you are in a smaller classroom, maybe it's a good idea to have that engagement. We talked about the naked roommate, and I don't want to see that, but I feel like chances of seeing that are much lower now because everyone shuts off their webcams. So are you in a huge class where it is a good idea and you want to ask your students to all have their webcams off so that you're not freezing or lagging both visually and, the audio? Or is it going to be a smaller class where you want them to engage and participate? Is it a language course, for example, where you want them, to see everyone while they're talking to each other and engaging? So yeah, some people are good with cameras off. I personally love cameras on. Is it something that you're just going to say on the first day of classes or that first, Zoom session that you have? Hey, I really don't like speaking to just names and black squares, can we please turn them on? Obviously microphones off, but just some things to consider. Another thing too is, are you going to be recording your sessions? So I know that now we are notified when something is being recorded, so students are aware that it will be recorded, but are you going to record it and then are students simply not going to come and they're going to rely on the recordings to then watch at a later time and therefore have less students come to your sessions, less participation? Or are you going to record it and then require students with a valid excuse to email you and then you can send them the recording as needed, so that students are still coming into class? Yes, so underage students, absolutely. So you have to take that into consideration as well. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Martha.
and just to jump, because each of us are at different schools and whatnot, and some schools were really decisive at the start of COVID with their Zoom policy. Harvard, I think, had it on their front page, like if you sign up for any of our classes, you agree to be recorded, and this is kind of a tact agreement between the university and yourself. UCF never had a clear policy. And I started recording and then things were happening. And I'm like, okay. um, I have concerns because my auditorium of 400 students does not have a name and face paired. It is a face that you see in the room, and you have no way how to like stalk them or anything creepy. Conversely, Zoom, you do. I also wind up with underage students in my GEP course specifically because Gen Psych is a GEP course. And, I was really having issues with that. And I'm like, I think there's a legal issue here. So I went to our Jana, our vice provost, and I'm like, hey, we don't have a policy and we need a policy, and where are we at on this? And so that whole, she got back to me with, those are extremely good questions and I need to run it by legal. And then then it was crickets, no response. um but I have some legit concerns about it. So that first semester I recorded but didn't share them or post them because I really do have concerns. I'm videotaping underage students. I've got naked people. Like it was a disaster on a couple levels. And I think there are some legal concerns about us videotaping and then sharing name face combos with other students. And part of that, again, I have big classes. So out of 400 students, what are the odds something's going wrong? Or some student isn't being creepy? Because I'm telling you, I got a lot of creepers, man. And maybe it's just psychology, but
Well,
Yeah.
and I think Evelyn's point that speaks to Evelyn's point, right? That you've got to establish, first of all, unless it's a university-wide or college-wide requirement or department, at present it's up to the faculty member, right? But the point I think with that Evelyn's making, and I think rightfully so, is you've got to establish that very upfront, right there in your syllabus. And I think both for your own protection, which I think is essential, but also for obviously transparency for students. If you're going to expect them to keep their camera on, and that is something that makes them incredibly uncomfortable, or they do not have a camera, having that up front in during ad drop week is essential. And so Evelyn, I think you're right on. So anything you want to add further to that?
So I was just going to say, establishing proper etiquette and rules and exactly what to expect in your classes, that is super important so that students know, oh, my camera will have to be on for this very small foreign language classroom or whatever discipline you're teaching. Maybe that's not for me. Or, oh, okay, I don't have to, this is not a requirement. I don't have to have my webcams on. I will not be recorded, so I am fine. Because anxiety plays a big factor too into this. So I feel like students are reporting to be a lot more anxious when it comes to videos and recording and interacting with other people online. So that is still, yes. So 3 pages of etiquette I see in the chat, and there are still issues. So yeah, it is difficult. And there is, again, you can go into as much detail, and the more detail, the better, to really explain what your expectations are for the course. And then just one more thing I wanted to touch on for the syllabus statements is maybe talk about interaction and how engaged students will be in your courses as well. So are they just going to come in and sit and watch, or do you require participation from them? Do you require attendance? Are they turning on their Zoom and then walking away? And then, yeah, in the log, it says that they logged in at a specific time and logged out at a specific time, but were they there? So maybe, polls at random times during your lecture where they actually have to click something and participate and see if they're there. So do you just require attendance or do you require participation? So interactive tools that we talked about as well, breakout rooms, all of that. So again, and I know we're running out of time, but just explain everything in detail in your syllabus. The more detail, the better, so that students know exactly what they're signing up for.
Yeah. And I think the point you're bringing up goes right in with the next part, right? Just like we know that active learning requires that you be active in help with teaching and active with the student learning. That does not mean that we negate by any means lecturing. Lectures can be very good and very active, but are they active? And so what are those interactive tools that we can use that we might find helpful? So I wanted to throw this out because I think the audience, hopefully this works. The audience probably has some good ideas. I took Slido, so there, nobody can take that one. Has some good ideas of what could make this an interactive live streaming experience. And I think that is something we should continue to build on. So if anybody wants to weigh in, hopefully it works. I got my fingers crossed. I got Slido. We'll have to do
I'm
this.
gonna go with polling. So that's one of the ones Flo
Did
mentioned
you do it?
earlier. I'm a huge fan of the Zoom polls. Poll Everywhere does not work for me because the free version is capped at like 40 people, and that's never going to happen in my teaching career. So, that is an issue for me.
You got to you point out a really good point, right? That you have to be mindful. Is it going to cost students? How much is it going to cost students? Is that going to be a barrier in itself? If you find a free version, great, but does it allow you to do the amount of students that you might have in your classes? If I have 150, will Kahoot allow for 150, and so on and so on and so on? Zoom polling, absolutely. Poll Everywhere, Menti, these are all really good. And of course, everybody's favorite, the Kahoot, I'm aging myself right there, by putting a THE in front of it. These are great examples. These are great. Flip. Oh, wonderful. Excellent. And again, as Flo says, we're modeling, hopefully what would be good practices when you are live streaming. It should be audience participation, figure out ways that are comfortable. If the people are not comfortable unmuting themselves and participating, then figure out ways that they could do so. If you want to have them get credit for it, do you have an interactive tool where they can both put their name on it and receive credit for it? Or do you have ways to put them in groups? Whatever system you're using, does it have breakout rooms? Are those breakout rooms productive? Are you giving them good, instructions to go into their breakout rooms of what they need to be discussing, and so on? So that is kind of the Did I lose my, I think I lost it. Wait. My apologies. I lost it, didn't I? Did I lose, guys? There it is. That is the general gist of our session, but I wanted to go ahead and just stop sharing. And I wanted to see if anyone had any questions or suggestions, thoughts that you wanted to add in there. And we're happy to send this out. We had a little bit mix up of which one was going, but I know they do have our slide deck as well in TOPkit. But we would love to have any questions or thoughts. And I know we're at the 3:45 time.
So Patty,
Yeah,
I just,
officially we have ended, reached the time. So there is a break scheduled from now, but I will, stay in
Well-
here if anybody wants to stick around and ask some questions before our next
Okay.
session starts at 4 o'clock.
Sorry we didn't leave enough time, but we'll hang out for a few minutes if anyone
Sure.
wants to
Thank
hang
you,
out and ask
Joe.
questions. And if you want to stop recording, Joe, thank you everyone for joining us. We
In the
greatly
chat,